Well, hello, this is Hall Martin with Investor Connect. Today we're here with Brett Hurd of Data.world. Brett, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Saul. I appreciate you having me on.
Well, you've had a great series of successful exits, and you're now a very robust angel investor, family office investor, and just wanted to learn more about how you handle incoming deal flow and how you process data and so forth before you make investment decisions. You've been in the Austin area for many years, leading companies and helping them grow and start up, but maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your investing experience.
Well, sure. So why don't I start at the beginning of my investing experience and kind of just work up to today? Because how I do it today is very different to how I originally did it. So when I first started angel investing, it was right after I left Bizarre Voice. And I wanted to stay very close to entrepreneurship and I wanted to help out. I always talked about that once Bizarre Voice went public, I wouldn't be one of those CEOs who just kind of retired to a ranch, that I would stay in the game and active and paying back to my community. And I thought that angel investing would be one way to do that. And so I just started to have meetings with entrepreneurs. And I also joined Austin Ventures alongside that because I thought I can learn from the best. I can learn from people that have been doing it for 20 plus years and interview them. I spent a lot of time with GPs there asking them, what have you learned over the past 20 years about investing and watching them operate? And so I started to have a lot of meetings with entrepreneurs. And by a lot, I really mean a lot. I saw at least 1,100 pitches in a 3-year period. And like anything I've ever done in my life, you've got to jump in and do it, for lack of a better word, in a dumb way to figure out how to do it in a smart way. You're not an expert in anything. You're not born an expert in anything. You've got to add that skill through, a lot of grit and a lot of hard work. And so I jumped in. I just started to have lots of meetings, and I would take meetings with almost any entrepreneur that contacted me. And one of the things that I did that I guess was unique, and I recommend this to other prospective angel investors, is, and maybe this is natural to me because I'm an entrepreneur and because I was raised by, parents who were very loving and spent a lot of time trying to help other people. But I always did something to try to help the entrepreneur that I was meeting with, even if I knew that I was not going to invest at all. And I would be very upfront with them if I wasn't going to invest at all. But I would always do one thing to help them. And that's actually where the idea was born out to start my blog, lucky7.io. I would hear a lot of common questions about like, well, how did you hire at Bizarre Voice? I've heard your hiring processes there were really legendary. And one of the things that was really neat about Bizarre Voice, we won the #1 place to work when we were small, then #1 place to work when we were medium, then #1 when we were large. Just had an incredible culture. And I really attribute a lot of that to the way we hired. And we hired the same way at my new startup, Data.world. And so I'd get these common questions and I would think, you know what, I'm answering the same questions over and over again to do something to try to help this entrepreneur. I've been in their shoes. I really care about helping them. Why not I just write a blog post? And then the blog gave me great leverage because a very light way I could help is if they ask me about, how do you hire the best or how do you raise money or whatever the question they would have, I could direct them to that blog post afterwards. And that was a way to help. There's nothing more annoying than meeting with someone that you're hoping will invest in your business and either they're rude or they're completely standoffish or they don't help you in any way. And I'm a big believer in karma. And so by helping, I think the word got out that I was a nice person to meet with, and that increased my deal flow and increased the quality of deal flow when people saw this wasn't just a passing interest, this was a real thing for me. And one thing led to another, and out of that, 1,100 plus companies that I've now met with, we invested in around 53. Some of those we didn't directly invest in. Some of those I just joined the advisory board of. I think our direct investments are something like 42 companies. And then along the way, I'd also meet with quite a few different VC firms. And the VC firms that ultimately we invested in, we're in 12 VC funds today. I looked at as a way for us to get diversified outside of sectors that we know and outside of geographies that we know. So, for example, we're we're investors in both of Kavu's funds, which are, CAVU, which are great funds founded by Clayton Christopher, who had a terrific exit with Deep Eddy Vodka. We were lucky enough to be one of the investors in Deep Eddy Vodka. And that kind of diversifies us into this whole CPG space. And they had a great exit recently with Buy, which was bought by Dr. Pepper for, I think, 1.8 billion. And they invested it at a pretty, got a pretty great return there. And so that's an area that I'm not going to be able to focus on, CPG. I don't know anything about. I can't help them like a Clayton can help them. So that's a great area to be a venture investor through the fund versus a direct investor. In terms of direct investments, not surprisingly, most of them for us have been in software as a service. And I say not surprisingly because that's how we made our money. When Deborah and I got married, I had $1,000, she had $2,000. I used to always joke with friends that I married the wealthier woman. so we literally made all of the money that we have together. And one thing that's, I think, a really important piece of advice for your listeners is that we've really limited our investing in either angel deals or venture funds to no more than 5% of our net worth. This is high risk investing. It's also, it's very high alpha. It can turn out really well, and our portfolio overall is performing really well. But we've limited to a very small percentage of our net worth because of how risky it is. And so that's something that I've seen a lot of people make a mistake on. They either write too big of checks or they put too much of their net worth into it. And that doesn't help the ecosystem at all, because if they end up losing too much money, then they're never going to be angel investors again. And you've got to have a lot of at bats to learn how to angel invest well. And I've made a lot of mistakes already. Like I said, you have to work dumb to figure out how to work smart. There's a lot of meetings that I stopped taking and would instead just see the pitch deck. But I would still always do something to help them. I would still always make an introduction or send them a blog post or, answer a question, do something to treat them with absolute respect, because I know how hard it is being in the arena and being an entrepreneur. And I think that gives me an advantage versus angel investors who have made their money at Fortune 500 companies and have never actually been in the arena as an entrepreneur and know how hard it is, and therefore have a natural level of empathy.
Well, I've been reading the Lucky7.io blog, and it's got a lot of great insights into it. And one of them that jumped out to me was the volume of deal flow you go through and the diversity of the deal flow. And you talk about context switching from one to the other very quickly. How do you manage the volume and the diversity and with metadata, or how do you do that?
I would say that the best way that I do that is through leveraging lots of friends.
Okay.
So, over the years, being an entrepreneur, I've built up a great network, and I'm a good natural connector. So let's say that a deal comes my way that looks like it's a AI related deal. Well, I know, 10 experts in AI, and I'm not going to invest in that company unless I introduce them to a few of those experts, and those experts really get into it and say that they would invest. Now, why would an entrepreneur take me up on that? Well, why would they not? These experts could help them. They could join their advisory board. There's all types of things that they could help them with. There's no way any one person can be an expert on everything. I'm an expert on software as a service business models, especially as it pertains to selling into the retail space. And I'm becoming an expert through Data.world on the whole data landscape, which is very complex and broad. So I leverage lots and lots of friends. And it's not unusual for me to be the last check in a Series A or seed round versus the first check. But all along the way, I think that entrepreneur would tell you that I've helped them a ton with introductions, with people that are experts in their space that did end up investing. There are times where I pioneered and been the first check in, but that's really unusual. I've either got to really know the space, or it's got to be someone who I've worked with before, who I just have 100% confidence in. Like, for example, I was the first check in Wisecrack, which just surpassed 2 million subscribers on YouTube. The CEO is a guy named Jacob Solomon. You can go check it out at youtube.com/wisecrack. It's kind of like education for the YouTube generation. It's really, really catchy, really great content. And the guy's just an absolute genius. He worked for me at Bizarre Voice. He's one of the top 10 people that we ever hired there. He's just unbelievable, a complete Renaissance guy. And he's done very well with the business. He's doing very well with it. And I'm feeling very, very good about being a pioneer there and being the first check in. But that's unusual that the majority of the time we're the last check in. And as you know, I include my wife in this as well.
Well, great. In looking through the blog post, one of the things that jumped out at me and what I've always found disheartening was sometimes I'd meet with entrepreneurs and, they're a great team and they're really working hard, but the idea was truly mediocre. And you wrote a message saying, the mission has to be worth fighting for.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
what do you do when you find an entrepreneur that they're fighting for a mission that's probably not worth fighting for? How do you coach them on that?
Well, what I'm passionate about and what other people be passionate about are different. So, I can't be too judgmental, right? Because they may truly be passionate about it. But, you can tell if someone is passionate through lots of tests. I mean, one of the blog posts that I'll never write, and I'm probably reticent to even bring this up with you and get this out there, but I thought about writing it for a long time, is that if you really are passionate about your business, then you should act like it. And, one gauge that I would use on whether or not I would invest is how aggressively the entrepreneur would follow up. And so let's just say that you found the cure for cancer. You, Hall, found the cure for cancer tomorrow, and that you had been laboring on that for a long time, and this was your dream. How would you act in that situation? Would you be pretty passive? Would you be pretty meek about it? Or would you, jump for joy and just, be all over the news and, be calling up all the pharmaceutical companies? And, you'd probably be wise to contact some IP attorneys. I mean, there's all types of things that you should do in that scenario. And so, I meet a lot of entrepreneurs where deep in my gut, I end up thinking, gosh, they're doing this because they think entrepreneurship is fun, or they have read about how much money people are making with entrepreneurship, which the reality is most people don't make any money with entrepreneurship. And so they basically are, kind of misguided, and they haven't really found their core passion yet. They're certainly not acting like it. And there's so much that goes into persistence, into that trait, to determining whether or not you're a successful entrepreneur. And if you're naturally passionate about something, then you're going to be naturally persistent about it. And if you're not naturally persistent about it, then maybe it's just you've got to develop that skill set, or you're too, meek, and, maybe you're not good at presenting and you need to go through presentation training. I mean, the beautiful thing now is that there are so many books, blogs, podcasts, that will allow you to learn entrepreneurship. Like, I think the best podcast right now to learn entrepreneurship is Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale. I think it's the best I've heard. And I was talking with Mike Maples Jr. recently at Floodgate, who's one of our investors here at Data.world. And he was one of my investors at Bizarre Voice. And I was telling Mike, and he was like, yes, I agree. That is the best one. That's the number one, podcast I recommend to my portfolio companies now. So, but you've got First Round Review, which is phenomenal, put out by First Round Capital. That's just a phenomenal blog. So there's just so many resources now for people to get good at things that they're not, that there's kind of no excuse. If they're passionate about it, then they should go for it. And if they're not passionate about it, they shouldn't be an entrepreneur for that specific business. And I'm trying all different types of ways to kind of gauge that passion.
Well, that's great. And one of the other things you mentioned is, the mission has to be worth fighting for, and you have to be working with the right people. And
Yes.
it's true, we always talk about the team is the most important aspect of any startup, not the product, not the space, but it's the team itself. But you phrased it, the right people. How would you define the right people for a team? What do you mean by that?
Well, so you've got to take it in the context of what I directly invest in. So software as a service. So if I am meeting with a founding team in the software as a service space, and there isn't a person on the founding team that knows how to sell it, and there isn't a person on the team that knows how to service it, and there isn't a person on the team that knows how to build it. If there's not people on the team that have all three of those skills and are passionate about that, then I will not invest. I'm not a believer in investing in the CEO that has the idea and has outsourced his development to a consulting firm. It just almost never works. You've got to have a team that knows how to sell it, service it, and build it. And that has to be embodied in the founding team. And if it's not, then it's a big, big red flag, because nobody will ever care about a business like the founder, no matter what. It's just a rule of law, because they were there at the birth. They were there at conception.
Cool. That's great. What else would you like to cover in the final minute we have here on our show? What else would you like to bring up that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, this is a pretty special week for us at Data.world. So this is my 70 plus hour a week passion with my current business. This is my sixth startup, and it's my first B Corp and public benefit corporation. This week, we actually just got named to the top 10% of all B Corps in the world by B Lab. And that's just such a humbling honor for us. And I'm just loving the mission that we're on, the team that we have here. It's the first time in my startup career where I've got three co-founders. It's the largest co-founder team I've ever had, but it's the biggest mission I've ever gone after. It's the most technically complex. And I've got a co-founder as our COO and two co-founders as our heads of engineering. One focuses more on the front end and one focuses more on the back end. And I just feel really blessed to be working with these guys, and seeing that type of accolade this week really made our week.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, and love to have you come back and dive deeper into some of these topics that we've covered in just a brief format here today. But appreciate your taking time, and hope to see you back here pretty soon.
Yeah, for any of your listeners that are into data, visit Data.world. And there's, I'm sure, a lot of data on there that you'll like, and we'd love your feedback on it too.
What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Probably the best way is just via Data.world or via Twitter. I'm pretty reachable. I'm pretty responsive.
We'll put those in the show notes for anybody that wants to reach back out to you, and I'm sure there will be. They'll go through the Data.world Twitter or website, which is a good way to do that. But,
yeah. Also, I'd recommend, just putting my blog in their reader, lucky7.io.
Okay. We'll do that as well. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Great. Thanks so much, all.